Hello, my name is Sam Feltham and welcome to Expert Interviews here on Smash the Fat. With me today is a guy that's been on the show before, probably about 20 episodes ago, talking about the base of evidence that we have for low carbohydrate diets. It's Professor of Cell Biology from New York State University, Richard Feinman. How you doing, Professor Feinman?
Hi, Sam.
All good? How's your day been thus far?
You were part of it. It took an incredible amount of effort to get onto Google Hangouts, but
we're here now.
We agree that they will be ruling the world, and we do what they say.
Yeah, no doubt. We will bow to them and do whatever they say. That's right. You have come out with a book that I believe is now in print, and it's been available kind of for the past couple of weeks on Kindle, called The World Turned Upside Down, the Second Low Carbohydrate Revolution. Now, we're going to kind of go into detail in that fantastic book. It really is kind of a real in-depth discussion about all things carbohydrate restriction and kind of, where the future is going to lead us. But before all of that, tell all the viewers and listeners that haven't heard of you before kind of what you do and what got you into this crazy world.
Well, I'm originally a professor of biochemistry. I'm actually trained as a protein chemist or enzyme chemist. I got into this crazy world, as you describe it, from having to teach nutrition to medical students. I've taught basic metabolism for many years, and I used low carbohydrate diets as a teaching method because they rely basically on the glucose insulin axis, and insulin is a kind of global hormone. In terms of hormonal control of metabolism, you could say it's the primary factor, and so that provided a lot of unity for what is a field that has a lot of detail. And at some point I had to give really formal nutrition lectures, and that's when I started to look into diets, from the strictly nutritional rather than just biochemical point of view. And it's been a very surprising ride.
Yeah, it certainly has. I mean, you've been in this crazy world of carbohydrate restriction since the first low carb revolution. So can you tell us a bit about kind of why, what was the first low carb revolution, and why is it a second low carb revolution?
Well, the book describes by analogy with the American Revolution. And the American Revolution had a kind of manifesto, Thomas Paine's Common Sense. And by analogy with that, I think Gary Taubes, I think it was really his article in the New York Times Magazine section, What If It's All Been a Big Fat Lie? That was really the manifesto of the low-carb diet. I mean, there was a background of scientific studies, but for a social revolution, that's what did it. The shot heard round the world, the battle that initiated the revolution analogous to battle at Lexington, was Gary Foster's multi-center study comparing the Atkins diet to a low-fat diet. And what's interesting is that Foster at the time gave a talk at Downstate, and he said that they set out to trash the Atkins diet. Not, in my view, the best way to do research, but
No.
they admitted that they didn't find what they wanted, that in fact it was better, the Atkins diet was better on many markers for cardiovascular disease, which was always been the main concern with the Atkins diet. And it was better for just about everything. They put a negative spin on it. Well, the usual negative spin is that more work needs to be done. So if you compare a low-fat diet and low-carb diet, the low-fat diet wins, which it rarely does. It means that it's good. If the low-carb diet wins, then more work needs to be done.
Of course.
So that's how it goes. So that was the first low-carb revolution, and people, all kinds of people, suddenly went on low-carb diets. It was a real opportunity. What killed it was primarily the dietitians. You know, rather than say, well, if you do want to do it, here's how we recommend it. They just tried to trash it. They dragged out all the old stuff that had been disproved. In nutrition, there's no double jeopardy. They can keep dragging out the same things no matter how often they disprove. So in the end, it fell into more disuse, and you know, they challenged all kinds of experimental evidence that would be required, notwithstanding the fact that we didn't have that on any other diet. One of the problems in nutrition is that we all act as if there's a well-established moderate diet that has good success, and we don't have that. If we had it, we wouldn't have an obesity epidemic. So anyway, they held up a standard for low-carb diets that they hadn't met themselves. But in fact, we met that challenge. Low-carb researchers did show not only was it better for weight loss, but if anything, it was better for cardiovascular disease. And the intuitive assumption that it was going to be way better for diabetes was played out. So faced with that, they just ignored it. The second low-carb revolution is controlled really by availability of knowledge. You know, the science is out there. You can look at it. Revolutions, well, there are revolutions in science that turn things around overnight, like the discovery of DNA and so on. But revolutions in politics drag on forever. I quoted in the book Gary Wills, who described the Gettysburg Address, which described the American Civil War as a second American Revolution. And those of us who lived through the civil rights period think we may have been through a third revolution. I'm not sure whether we're having a fourth revolution or not. But
yeah, possibly.
So
possibly about diet, I don't know.
Pardon?
Possibly about diet. That could be the next revolution.
Well, in the diet revolution, the fighting is still going on. One of the important things, though, is that because of the importance of insulin as an anabolic hormone, low-carb diets may be important in cancer. And they will almost surely be important in the sense that we're going to investigate them. Whether they give us, whether the promise that we see pans out, we don't know, of course. So that's the historical perspective.
Absolutely. I mean, it's been an interesting 15 years, kind of in the early 2000s, with kind of, as you say, Gary Tubbs' article kind of setting off a bit of a first low-carb revolution, and then kind of just in the past 5 years, it's really been starting to get traction, because there's so many randomized controlled trials out there now, and there's been 25 at least that I've found in the past 15 years that show that low-carb dieters compared to low-fat dieters lose more weight and become healthier. And it just seems like a complete no-brainer that like if you're getting an effect as consistent as in 25 randomized controlled trials in different institutions around the world, it's pretty telling that that's what's going to happen every single time, right? And part of that as well is that some of those randomized controlled trials is with diabetic patients as well, and that's kind of a bit of an emphasis in the book as well, isn't it? Kind of how helpful it is in type 2 diabetes and type 1 diabetes as well.
Yeah, I think if there's one message in the book, it is that nutrition is applied biochemistry. And in metabolism, the way I always describe it is that it's like American football. 10 different things are going on. But in fact, you can get pretty far following the quarterback. And the quarterback in metabolism is insulin. And if you follow that, you learn a lot about metabolism. In that sense, diabetes is really the essential, most important nutritional biochemical problem. You could look at it as an extreme of all the other metabolic disturbances like obesity and metabolic syndrome. So, and of course, most people, certainly most people in my generation, assumed that if you have diabetes, you want to be in a low-carb diet. The most telling, most obvious feature of diabetes and a causal effect of a lot of the problems is high blood glucose. It doesn't make any sense to add dietary glucose to that. And the only reason for doing that is that the low-fat message became overpowering, and physicians incomprehensibly were more concerned about a long-range conjectural effect of dietary fat when they could see an immediate benefit of reducing dietary carbohydrate. So, you know, how this has been possible is will be incomprehensible when people look at the history of this problem. So that's why we emphasize diabetes. If you can deal with that, then it's kind of the extreme case of metabolic problems. I would add, and I make this point in the book, that low-carb diets are primarily therapeutic. Okay, and I am actually my students, and maybe everybody is surprised to find out that I'm not really a low-carb advocate. I think if you're okay, you're okay. If you're on a low-fat diet and you're not overweight and you're getting exercise, you're probably eating the right thing. What is obvious, however, is that if you have a disturbance in the glucose-insulin axis, you should be on a low-carb diet as the default. In other words, the way we describe it is it's the place that you start. If it doesn't work out, you can go to something else, but that's the place to start. In that sense, metabolic syndrome plays a very important role in the philosophy, and I try to bring this out because what metabolic syndrome is a collection of markers. It's not a disease, but it indicates propensity for obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular disease. And the underlying assumption is that there's a controlling factor, probably related to insulin. And the implication is that if you can treat any one of these features of metabolic syndrome, you can probably treat them all. Well, the perspective I take in the book is that there are a million ways to lose weight, especially if you're young and male and get some exercise. But even if you're not, there are a lot of workable plans in weight loss. We don't really know what causes cardiovascular disease. We know the things that are relevant, but we don't really have an answer. We do know the best approach to diabetes. You know, I mean, the problem, of course, is not completely solved, but we know that low carbohydrate diet is going to help the great majority, if not almost every person with diabetes. So if metabolic syndrome is a real thing, if all of these things, high blood glucose, high insulin, high triglycerides, low HDL, if these are all tied together, then the syllogism is, if we can treat one, we can treat them all. So the conclusion then is that knowing what to do for diabetes, we may have a general approach for health.
Absolutely, and kind of as you say, it's the starting point for people as well. It might not be where they finish, but it's certainly the most effective place to start, as shown in the randomized controlled trials. Now, kind of the low-fat advocates kind of come back with epidemiological studies, which is kind of population studies where they look at trends in populations and try and correlate it with outcomes. Now, you kind of criticize that a little bit in the book. So explain to the listeners and viewers kind of why that might not be the best style of evidence.
I'll go a little bit further. I was actually somewhat restrained in my book, but the classic epidemiologic study is the relation between smoking and lung cancer and related throat cancer and so on. So the person, Bradford Hill, was the investigator who did this, and what he showed is that if you were a smoker, you had a 20 times greater chance of having lung cancer, and if you were a heavy smoker, you had probably greater than 30 increased chance of lung cancer. And this work was very carefully done and is the classic study in epidemiology. The problem is, it may be the only good study. The progression of studies that we now see every week, there's an association between red meat and diabetes, and brown rice and cardiovascular disease, or whatever. You can make up almost every combination. All of these don't show 20 times increase in risk. They show 1.5 times. All of which would be okay if the 1.5 increase, that increase in risk was accompanied by the same kind of accuracy in getting the primary data. But food recollection data has serious limitations. You know, it's not nothing. It's all data has inherent error. The error in food recollection data is fairly high. It's not 100%, but it could be 50%. When you start with that poor data, you got to come up with something strong. If you come up with 1.5, and 1.5 isn't even as high a number as you get in a lot of these epidemiologic studies. Mm. If you don't get something strong, then you don't have anything that's worth changing your lifestyle on.
No, certainly not.
In addition, some of them are really bad. Some of them will try to show you that red meat is associated with diabetes. Well, when you look at their data, it turns out it isn't. Well, what do? They correct for any number of things. You know, weight, religion, type of meat, whatever. If you have to correct the data to get the answer, you're in trouble. Or we're in trouble.
Absolutely. It's like they're trying to rejig the data to fit their preconceived ideas. It kind of feels like that. Would you kind of agree with that?
Yeah, well, I made the point. I wrote a letter to the journal on the red meat diabetes study, and I said, you know, first I showed that the data didn't fit, and they said, well, they came back and said, you know, if you adjust it, it'll fit. But I said that this is not in, you know, this is not reasonable. What we know is that as diabetes went up, red meat consumption went down, and not a little bit. There was a big drop in red meat and a big increase in diabetes. Their answer to that is, well, there are other factors. Well, that's not an answer. You have to find the other factors. So what they're saying really is that if the primary result doesn't come out right, if red meat is not associated with diabetes, we're going to make it fit. We'll bring in other factors to make it fit. If the primary data, the association in the population between red meat and diabetes, does fit, they'll say we'll bring in stuff to make it not fit. You can't have it both ways. You know, either you're going to go with the data or you're not. So the focus I gave was really, Bradford Hill not only did these studies with lung cancer and smoking, but he actually set out a number of principles which allow us to look at these kinds of epidemiologic studies and ask, when does association imply causality? You know, it's commonly pointed out that it doesn't necessarily imply causality, but what are the criteria? And he gave 9 criteria. They're not cut and dried, but I think applying those to what's in the literature, you would find that the medical nutritional literature is a total mess. There's just dozens of papers that are meaningless or worse. So I know that sounds pretty strong, but we really have a problem.
No, it is a real problem, because it seems like people are doing these studies, and to me it feels like it's just a waste of money. You know, it's like that money could go to a better controlled study, or go into a pot to try and get the definitive studies that we can create.
The classic boondoggle is the Women's Health Initiative.
Mm-hmm.
That was $400 million. That's 400 $1 million research grants, and they found nothing. But they found nothing sitting on a background of failures of any number of other studies. What were they hoping? That suddenly all the previous results would not be true? It doesn't make any sense. So yeah, it's a waste of money, but it's also a corruption of science, which is the thing that bothers me most. Science isn't a religion, but it is a way of life that has some enlightening power. Corrupting it is bad. And there's also real harm to the patient. Diabetes is a very serious disease. Mm-hmm. Clinicians will tell you that it's like cancer in its devastating effects. And to follow a course of treatment that is so irrational and has such limited results with so many side effects, it's really a scandal.
It's rather terrible, and kind of the thinking behind current conventional advice is really the laws of thermodynamics, really, and that, you know, just you have to be counting calories, and if you consume more than you expend, then you'll put on weight, and if you put on weight, then you'll become type 2 diabetic, and things like that. And you have a long discussion of that in the book. So what are your thoughts on that debacle?
Well, that's how I got into this field.
Mm-hmm.
Because people kept saying things about the laws of thermodynamics. I found that really ironic, because thermodynamics is one of the most complicated fields in chemistry, and I would have to say that, like most chemists, I'm a little bit diffident about saying I'm a real expert, but I knew more than Gary Foster, and when he came to Downstate to say how he set out to crash the Atkins diet, he said that it was still all about calories, and did refer to the laws of thermodynamics, which people mean the first law. So I tried to jump in and explain. I mean, I have taught thermodynamics and the related subjects, statistical mechanics. So I was a little bit of an expert, and so we wrote a paper. I got the impression nobody wanted me to help them out. But the real thing is, you only need one experiment. You only need your experiment. Okay? The thing that's holding this whole thing up, Sam, is that you got to redo that experiment in a university setting.
That's it. I need to admit myself. I need to admit myself to University College London, and then we'll sort it all out.
Right after this broadcast, you set this experiment up. It is a all swans are white problem. Okay, all you need is one black swan, and all you need is one that's dramatic. I mean, that is what you need. It's got to be really black. But I think the problem is more historical. It is, well, in all of biology, there are two trends in the history of the world. There's a movement that says people, especially, but biology is special. It has, in essence, the so-called vital force, and that's different from physical science. And then there are people who say you are what your chemicals are. You can't escape being a physical object. And in nutrition, it goes back to Lavoisier, who measured. He made a calorimeter for a whole animal, put it in a container, and he packed it with ice. He could measure the CO2 that was produced by the animal, and the heat that was generated melted the ice, and he collected that. And he said it was just like burning anything else. And he said life is combustion. Well, that's true up to a point. But what happens is that the physical science is a little bit more subtle for biology. So I think a key problem in this was studies in humans of calories burned and energy produced. And Atwood is a person is usually associated with really giving rise to the calorie as a calorie story. But if you look at his data and you look at what the error in these things is, it's only approximate. So we learn in school that carbohydrate is 4 calories per gram. Well, it's not true for every carbohydrate. Some are 4.2, some are 3.8. 4 is a good number, but there's error that is exactly the same order of error in the difference between how two different people may lose weight on a diet of different composition. So the calorie as a calorie data wasn't there to begin with. But insofar as it's there because of the unique effects of biology. The first rule of biology is everything, or biochemistry, everything is connected in feedback. You know, if you reduce the amount of cholesterol you take in, your body knows it and will produce more cholesterol. So things try to be maintained constantly. If you, in that again, I always cite American football, or maybe even better is metabolism is a little bit like chess. If you try to read it, I'm not a chess player, but every now and then I try to read a chess game, and nothing happens. And the reason is that modern chess is so sophisticated that they all know what they're going to do. So if you want to find out what was going on in a chess game, you have to read the notes that people write about the chess game, and they'll say, well, white was attacking black's bishop, but black countered with, and so they jockey back and forth. And the further analogy I make, not to stretch this too far, is that you have to break through this. And that's what a low carbohydrate does, is it tries to bypass these feedbacks by having a dramatic reduction in glucose and therefore insulin. Not to overdo this, what everybody loved about Bobby Fischer is that he could get around the mentality of playing to a draw. He was sufficiently creative that even an amateur like me could read his games and see the inventiveness. So, not to overdo it, low-carb diet is the Bobby Fischer of diets. It breaks through. Well, Jeff Olick is the major researcher in low-carb diets, and he said, you know, it's so hard to do nutrition. It's very complicated, things don't change. But a low-carb diet, you get real data. Some people in low-carb diet, they lose weight, you can see it. So I think that's the real problem.
Absolutely, it's really, really consistent, the data, and it's kind of going to be really hard to avoid in the next 10 years to try and avoid this data as much as possible. And hopefully books like yours are going to be kind of a step forward for science and implementing the right strategies. Now, go on, sorry.
I was just going to say, certainly everybody can help the global health by buying the book.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I agree. Now, one thing that I'd like to go into is that you do talk about fructose, and for those that don't know, sugar itself is kind of two molecules: glucose, which everybody knows about, and fructose, which is the sugar that you can kind of find in fruit and other things. And you actually talk about fructophobia because you don't think that maybe it's as bad as we think.
Well, it's certainly not as bad as we think. The problem that I'm critical of is that the poor science going into this will never find out how bad it is. You know, we don't know. The experiments are not being done right, and you know, the wild exaggeration. Well, there was a comment on the Amazon site for my book. Somebody said that I was not explaining adequately my objections to Rob Lustig, who is a major fructophobe. Lustig's a nice guy, and like me, he comes from Brooklyn, and so that means that he can take it as well as dish it out, unlike some of the nutritionists. So I don't mind giving him a hard time. You know, basically he set out this idea that fructose is like alcohol, and it's not. It's not biochemically. He generates an idea that is now all over the internet, saying that the metabolic pathways for fructose are like the metabolic pathways for alcohol, and they're not. They're not at all, except insofar as everything in metabolism is connected. They're completely different. There is the notion that fructose, or that is sugar in general, is somewhat habit-forming or uniquely
addictive,
uniquely reinforcing. But we knew that. That's why we serve dessert after we eat. You know, in behavioral terms, sugar is a generalized reinforcer. That means you don't have to be hungry to eat sugar. But we knew that, and but we knew that that wasn't the same thing as getting drunk.
Mm-hmm.
And we also knew that, in fact, most of us don't overconsume sugar and don't overconsume alcohol. Alcoholism is a serious disease. But the and the idea that it is a unique kind of metabolic toxin is not right. You know, there's very limited, there's almost no evidence to suggest that. I mean, we knew from Alice in Wonderland. Alice says, the queen tells Alice that there are sisters at the bottom of the well. All they eat is treacle. And Alice says, well, if they only eat treacle, they'd be sick. And the queen says, oh, they were sick. They were very sick. We knew that before we developed an obsession with sugar. The question for us, that is for dieters, is faced with the current low-carb diet. I'm sorry, the current high-carb diet, the current standard American diet. If we have a problem of being overweight, or a problem with risk for cardiovascular disease or high blood sugar, what should we do? Should we keep the high carbohydrate level, take the fructose out that's in our diet and put in glucose? And that's the implication of making fructose some kind of great evil, is that we're going to get a big effect if we take fructose out and put in glucose. Or should we instead take out any carbohydrate as much as we can and put in fat? Which is going to have the biggest effect? Well, that experiment could be done. It could be done by all of the people who are out there doing all kinds of experiments trying to prove how bad sugar is. The fact that they haven't done it is very suspicious. It means they don't want to know that answer. And we have a good idea, because they haven't been done in parallel, but they've been done separately. Mm-hmm. The effect of a low-carb diet is very dramatic compared to anything done in replacing glucose with fructose or vice versa. Mm-hmm. So I have the figure here.
Yeah, please do.
Okay, this is the person on Amazon said that I said that fructose and glucose were the same. It's just another carbohydrate, and I didn't say that exactly. I said it's primarily the thing they primarily have in common is that they're carbohydrates, but they are different. However, the differences are not as dramatic as you think. Here's a perfect example. I don't know whether this can be seen.
Cool. Yeah. If you bring it up and then slightly tilt it forward, that's perfect.
Okay. Now the red shows what happens in replacing some of the glucose with fructose, or the effect. I think that this is. I'm sorry. This is. Yeah. This is added fructose-sweetened beverage to the diet versus adding glucose-sweetened. And the red is fructose, and the black is glucose. Well, the fructose is worse. Triglycerides go up more. Mm-hmm. But look at the error bars. What that's telling you is that on average that's true.
If you just bring it back just a touch, like an inch, bring it backwards towards you. There you go. Spot on.
So that's the average. But suppose you're not average. Suppose you fall into the error bars. Well, then you don't know. The important point, though, is that if you did a picture like this, and it's been done, I don't have it right in my hand, Jeff Bolick did that, and he looked at the response to fat or the response to glucose, comparing taking out sugar and starch and putting in fat, you get big differences, tremendous differences. So, but what's the implication here? The implication here is this is 55% carbohydrate. Is that what we really want to know? Do we really want to know, let's go on a 55% carbohydrate diet, and should it be glucose or fructose? We'd stipulate that glucose is maybe better. Of course, my guess is, and I don't know, haven't tracked down the data, but I can tell you that one of the I don't want to quote him because he put it in an email, but one of the serious fructose researchers says in diabetes, glucose is the thing. It's not fructose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Because, of course, diabetes is about insulin, and fructose does not interfere with insulin in the same way.
So it's almost like, I mean, glucose, fructose to you, almost equal kind of effects. Not exactly the same, but almost.
Well, let me say, the other side of nutrition is primarily applied biochemistry, but it's also practice. It's also behavior, and it's also, strictly nutritional ideas. A very good way to go on a low-carb diet is to cut out soda, right off, okay? For many people who don't have a terrific weight problem, but just slightly overweight, that's all it takes. So just cutting out sugar-sweetened soda can be very valuable.
Mm-hmm.
There's not much value to having candy if you think you're really going to try to lose weight. So it's a great strategy. For many people, it gives you tremendous results. For some of us, I'm a guy who's been fighting fat all his life. I don't really have a sweet tooth. It's the pasta and the rice and putting the meat on a slice of bread that is the problem for me.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have much sugar to cut out. I had to reduce the amount of fruit, but that's a source of carbohydrate for me even now. So that's not the whole story. But I think for people with diabetes, you're going to get much better results in terms of the disease cutting out starch before you cut out sugar. We don't know that, but that's
it's a possibility.
That's reasonable.
I'm interested to hear your thoughts on lactose as well. So for those that are listening, that's the sugar in dairy.
Well, it is also a sugar, and it is converted to glucose. Mm-hmm. And you want to keep that low as well. Mm-hmm. The craziest thing that I see is low-fat Greek yogurt, or strange yogurt. I mean, the whole idea of Greek yogurt is that it has the fat in it, mm-hmm. that it has taste. And you take that out, why would you want to bother with the yogurt altogether?
I know, it's crazy, isn't it? It's a bizarre situation that we're in, Professor, and hopefully kind of in the next 10 years we're really going to change things with some of the experiments and trials that are going to be coming out in the next 10 years. So kind of where do you see the future lying forward for diet, nutrition and health?
Well, I don't in obesity and diabetes, this is in quotation marks, no more work needs to be done. We have the raw outline of the answer there. Of course, we always say that what we know is much less than what we don't know. So a lot of the things are going to change. I mean, we really don't, strictly speaking, we don't understand almost anything in metabolism very well. But for a practical standpoint, it's certainly a place to start. The future I see is in trying to get a grip on real cell biology, which means seeing if ketogenic diets and carbohydrate reduction in general will really help with cancer. And that's the experimental work that we're doing now. It's very difficult because, of course, cancer is many different things. Even for a single tissue, there are many different kinds of cancer. So our review of the literature and the limited experimental work that we've done shows that if ketone bodies will repress cancer growth under conditions that we've done in the test tube, and my colleague Gene Fine has done patient studies. I think it's very promising. We see it mostly at this point as an adjunct to drugs, because I don't think we have the kind of understanding that we have in simpler problems like obesity. So that's our current thinking. We hope to get some support from the drug companies. Well, we are undertaking crowdsourcing. I hope that a lot of your viewers will be wondering what to do with their money so as to help health. We're going to give them an opportunity to support the research, but we're also think that the drug companies should be interested. I'm not one of the people that thinks that the problem is big pharma. Big pharma. I always say that big pharma in dealing with diet is like the police supporting crime prevention. They're not going to put themselves out of business.
There you go.
So, and I think they have a role to play that they really can't have. I mean, the thing that physicians particularly don't really understand is that we're doing the same thing. We're targeting biochemical pathways. The advantage for targeting it top down, as opposed to try to get into the cell directly, is that you have less side effects, and you know where it's going because you know where it's going normally. There are very few drugs that have only one real target. So that's where I see the future. I see it in cancer and related disease. But
and how can people go about supporting the research that you want to do?
Gee, I thought you'd never ask. Well, I think we did run a short campaign, which you can still find on Facebook. You can buy a T-shirt. We tried to keep the price low. We didn't realize that the company that runs the campaign charges shipping charges. So the T-shirt with the shipping charges will cost you $27, but it has the metabolic pathway for ketone body generation, and it has the title "Ketone Bodies: Food of Our Ancestors." We're sorry that the price came out too high, but all of the money goes into our research. There's nobody besides the T-shirt company gets any profit.
Fantastic. And is that on the Nutrition and Metabolism Society Facebook page?
It's on Facebook, you're right, and all the various nutrition Facebook sites. But in general, we'll have lots of opportunity for people to donate to the research. I mean, I think that it's an unusual way to raise money. We're not used to it. The government research is generally funded by the government, and the process now is too slow, and they have too little money, and the system is totally out of control. I mean, the problem is that the government now, by that I mean the NIH, is funding such a small fraction that a study section may have 10 outstanding grants, and how are they going to, and if they can only fund 3 of them, or maybe 2, how are they going to decide? they do the best they can. Sometimes they don't do the best they can. Sometimes there's a breakdown in self-awareness. I mean, when I was on study sections at the NIH, I was impressed with how people were able to put aside their personal prejudices and try to, look at the facts. But when you get down to this level, science is not the only consideration. So I think crowdsourcing will be an important part of it.
Yeah, trying to get the right experiments done and try and get more conclusive evidence, because I suppose people want to see the black and white answers, so that then they can properly take action. I'm not even sure if they want the actual black and white answers, because then they're going to be stuck between a rock and a hard place. Really.
Yes, that's always the problem with science, is that you have to follow what you find.
That's right. Yeah, follow the data, please. Crazy. So people can grab your book on Amazon.
Right.
If they want to get it on Amazon and they want to support the show, if they follow the link smashthefat.com/Feinman UK, then that will take you through to the amazon.co.uk store and give us a little bit of a kickback to help run the show. And if you're in the US, go through to smashthefat.com/Feinman US, and that'll take you through to amazon.com, and then you can buy the book through that. And just so everybody knows, Feinman is spelled Feinman.
And right after supporting research, getting Sam into an academic setting is one of the major priorities.
Absolutely. I wouldn't mind taking 3 weeks to come into New York. I could do a 3-week trip to New York.
We'll have to talk about that as soon as we get off the air.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I myself will know that, I'm glad that you spelled my name. I myself will know that I really made it when Google doesn't say, did you mean Feynman?
That's the problem, right? That's the problem. And people can read your blog as well, which is Feinman, spelled Feinman, theother.com. Is that
FeinmanTheother.com.
That's right. I love that. I love that title. It's absolutely brilliant.
And the blog has been on hold as I finish the book, but I will have a post probably tomorrow. And the post will be about whistleblowing, and I will provide the parable of the big fish, which may be of interest.
Fantastic, fantastic. Well, I highly recommend going to read Professor Feinman's book, The World Turned Upside Down, the second low-carbohydrate revolution. Make sure you get it on Amazon, smashthefat.com/Feinman UK or Feinman US. And thank you so much for your time today, Professor Feinman. I know it's very precious. And we're trying to change the world here. So any time that you can spare to let the folks out there know what you're doing is absolutely fantastic. So much appreciated.
Okay, thank you, Sam. It's been a pleasure.
Ideal, and we'll speak soon.
Okay.
Take care. Bye.